Hello everybody, so here is the functionality that I just showed you, but now implemented with Tailwinds. So I installed it. You can see the tree is really different, of course, because we have so the input and output CSS. And it's the first time that I'm working with Tailwind, so I had to go slow to be sure to understand how it works, and yeah, just to make it easier to see what produces error or not. So because I have Tailwind, I removed all of the styles that of my previous work. The functionality is still here, but the styles are really resetted from start. So that is the reason why now what you see is that. So there's almost no styles, only the font and some color. So what I showed you earlier were only that part, and I added the footer and the header. And I did some tests to understand how Tailwind was working. So first with the font. So I used as my default font the DM Sans, which is the font that I'm using on my design. And then I also tried to see if I was using font serif, which is the second font that I'm using is Spectral. So if I am using this class on my HTML, would it work? And so if I do the test, we would see that it is not working. Why? Go live. Okay, I need to go live, but on my index, right? And I also need for my terminal to run the watch on my styles. So I do npm run dev. npm run dev. Okay, and so now I should see it's working. So the class is working. And then I also wanted to know if not only the customized style that I create are working, I also wanted to know if I could use the default styles created by Tailwind, if they were still available, even though I had those style customized. And it worked because I actually used the mono class, and I used it here in my HTML. So let's find it, mono, here. And if I remove it, we would see that it changed. So doing that gave me a better understanding on what to do and how I could use Tailwind. Then after the font, I also wanted to work with the colors. So I don't want to use at all the color palette per default of Tailwind. So what I did is I used that class to reinitiate everything, and I created my own colors. I wanted to start with the functional colors, so info, success, warning, and error. Just as a test, because it's so visual and it would give me a better understanding of how it works. So I obviously followed the instruction of the documentation of Tailwind. But so sometimes you read the documentation, you implement it, and it's not really working. So obviously I tried it. And doing so, I've noticed that the colors that I had on my library, so let's go to the library of my project and to the colors that I defined. So this is my design system that I created from scratch, by the way. So I'm totally updated with the last functionalities of Figma. And here you can see that I defined the primitive colors. I categorize them per brand color. Then you have the neutral color. Then you have the system or functional colors, which is success, error, warning, and info. And then I'm using those primitive inside of the semantic. So all the colors that I'm using for the background, for instance, the neutral colors, and there's also the colors that are being used in the background of success, error, warning, information. And there's also the colors that are being used on interactive elements, which are clickable. There's also the colors for the text, and there's also the color for links, the borders and dividers, and there's the icon and the focus. And so when I started implementing the classes on Tailwind of my functional or color system colors, I found that they were not really matching the requirement of Tailwind. And I did some research and find that tool, which is really amazing. So check this URL, which give you all of the tools that you need as a designer to be able to not only create a harmonized color palette, but also for them to be totally matching the requirements of Tailwind. So perhaps your developer are not using Tailwind, and this is the reason why it's really interesting to talk to the developers while you are implementing the design, so you can know how best to hand over your work. And so what I did with the color, how I worked with that tool. For instance, let me take that reference. So this is the color palette that has been improved, and you can see that it's quite pretty. It's better than what I had anyway, because the scale of colors that I had was not really exactly the right one. So instead of having this color in the 400, I had a differentiation with the one that I had on 700, and that was not nice at all. And so what I did is that I used that tool, and per default, this color was 500. And the problem is that in my designs, the 50 and 100 values are really close to the white color. And here what I find amazing with that tool is that you can actually play with the intensity, or where do you want your default color to be in the color palette. And that helps you create that subtlety if you need more subtlety. For instance, here I decide to use that reference at 800. That would push the color to the darkest of the color scale. Yeah, exactly. And you can see that now the 50 value and 100 value are much smoother and much closer to the white color, which is the effect that I'm intended to have. So once I had that, I just scroll down and I have access to the code that I can then copy paste to my file input.css. Which is what I did. And also, if you are still working with the previous version of Tailwind, you just click here and it will provide you the code for Tailwind version 3. This is really, really great. And then I wanted to do the same work with the red value. So I am using 800 as my reference to work around. And what I did to have the same harmonious shades of colors, I just selected the red, so slide the cursor to the red area, and it just provided me with that great color shade. And then all I had to do is just to grab the piece of code here. So, and I did that for the rest, and then updated my colors in the primitives. And then once I did that, inside of the local variables, so in functional, I did updated those value accordingly to the color palette that I was refining for Tailwind. Obviously, because it's a design system, those changes just was reflected in the semantic variables that I defined. And obviously, not only it did that automatically, but it also was implemented automatically in all of the component and variant where I use the colors. And finally, the library, once being updated, would also be updated here. When I did my test, just to make sure that everything was working, I tried obviously the new classes that I created here inside of my HTML. So if I change info, for instance, and I want to use success, I just save it, so we can see that the styles have been pushed, processed, and then my design have been updated, and you can see that it became green. So now that everything is on track, I understand how to use Tailwind, and it is working. I will keep on working on the design to finally have that final results. Thank you for listening, and subscribe to see the evolution of my work. Thank you.